Welcome to the Two Bit Cipher. It's your boy D Breeze, aka Petty Picasso. Got my boy SeaWorld with me. What's going on?
What up? What up? What up, man? Good to be
Nothing,
here.
man. I know, man. It's nice. It's been a little minute,
It's
hadn't
been
it?
it's been it's been a minute. It's been a
Been a little
minute,
bit,
man. I've been
man. It's
watching all
cool.
these solo joints, getting jealous. So I'm glad to be here. You
Yeah,
know
you
what I mean?
already know. All right, cool. So, today's episode 3, will be mental health. Just
Mhm.
a general conversation on mental health. What is mental health? What are you doing for your mental health? What's positive, what's negative? All right, let's get into it. So, mental health, what is mental health? What is your definition
Mhm.
of mental health?
Man, that's a good question, man. I feel like for me, it's anything that makes your mind happy, right? It's pretty simple. Like I think is as simple as it gets. I think people get into the conversation of mental health where it's like if you're stress free or if you're if you have a bunch of things in your life that um, take away anxiety and those things are great. I feel like that's pretty accurate. But if
Hmm.
I'm thinking about what is mental health, it's just your mind being in a place of um, I don't like to say the word zen. I feel like zen is kind of that's too
Zen
deep.
is in right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, isn't it? That's a
Yeah,
thing, right? Yeah, but I feel
yeah.
it's just if your mind is in the right place. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be too high or too low. I think sometimes people feel like to be mentally healthy, you have to be happy or you have to be, you have to have joy in your life, which I think those things are great. Um,
Mhm.
but happy people aren't always mentally healthy either.
Oh, absolutely.
And just because people are upset or anxious doesn't mean they have bad mental health either.
Right.
So I think whatever works for you as far as the right state of mind. I think the right state of mind is dependent upon the person.
Hmm.
And for me, a good mental health for me is when my stress level is low, or
Hmm.
when I am not moving too fast. I'm a very paced person. So if somebody's quickening my pace, or if I find myself doing a lot of things at once, I'm not in the right mental space. Or if I
Hmm.
find
Oh
myself
yeah.
angry quickly, triggered quickly, I'm like, okay, there's an imbalance there somewhere.
Yeah.
That's it for me. What about you? What about you,
Absolutely.
Petty
Yeah.
Picasso?
So I when I think of mental health, I think of the health of my emotions, right? The
Okay.
health of my heart, the health of my
Hmm.
brain, right?
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
have for me, I've experienced, which like everybody else, but I've experienced some childhood trauma, which I talk about.
Sure.
So like I look at it as just the overall health of me internally. How about that?
Hmm.
Just
That makes
myself
sense.
internally.
Hmm.
How is
Hmm.
that health? Because it can be good or bad.
Yeah.
So what is the status of those, individual pieces, right?
Yeah.
And for me, if my heart is happy, I'm
Hmm.
typically a pretty happy person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For the most
Yeah.
part, and my
Hmm.
emotions, right? And when my mental health is off or not in good
Hmm.
standings, I'm kind of a mess.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
angry, because
Yeah.
that anger will creep up.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
currently mental health is nice. We got
It's
some good
huge.
things, we got and for me, I got some good things going
Yeah.
and I try to, just keep those things going,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
that's what I look at with mental health. And now we can
Hmm.
get into like what do
Hmm.
you do for your mental health, right? To keep
Yeah.
it in, I always look at things like in the green, right?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
I just want my mental health to be in the green. And for me, because I've been in the red,
Yeah.
I even go green yellowish. Like
Yeah.
even if
Yeah.
I'm in that little yellow range,
Just a little yellow ain't bad.
just a
Little
little
yellow ain't
yellow
bad.
is not bad because we got
Yeah.
shit
Yeah.
going on. We
Right.
got stuff
Right.
going on. And to be in the green constantly is I think it's unrealistic. I think a lot
Hmm.
of people, actually thrive for that, which if it works for you, it works for you. But I think trying to be in the green can be unrealistic. But again, I don't know. That's just me, right?
Hmm.
But there
Yeah.
are, there are some things that I do, and I'm sure you do some things. So what do you do for your mental health?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good insight as far as that yellow and green. I think people spend a lot of time trying to get to green, but
Hmm.
life just ain't green, right? It's not going to
It's just
be
not.
green all the
It's
time,
just
and
not.
that's okay. Like as long as people are aware of that, they're okay with that. It's not going to be green all the time. So I think for me, I consider myself a relatively highly intelligent, highly emotionally intelligent person.
Yeah. You talk about
And
emotional intelligence a lot.
right,
I see. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right. I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like that's something, and it's because my line of work. It's also because of the research and stuff I've done in it and practices that I do. So it's not like I just fell into this, but for me, part of that emotional intelligence is having regular interactions with people.
Okay.
Outside of you know my family. Obviously, I interact with my wife, my children on a day to day
Yeah, for
basis,
sure.
but interacting with our group, in the Discord, interacting with my coworkers, and for me, getting that deep conversation once or twice a week is pretty important for me. So, and it's
Hmm.
pretty critical for my mental health. Uh, I know when I haven't had a deep conversation in a while because I start seeking it in every conversation. I'm trying to pull
You try to
the
find
trying to
something
pull
in
the
there.
threads. Yeah,
Like,
I'm trying to get
man,
something
like a
out of
trigger
it.
word will happen. There's a trigger. Oh, let me go
Yeah,
in right here. Let me go ahead. I can
exactly.
go in right here and get real deep with this.
Man, I gotta dive in a little bit more. And it's because, it's like when you talk to people who have been around their kids too long
Hmm.
and you've spent too much time talking in kid mode and you just are thirsty for a real conversation, right? You're
Sure.
like, man, why can't I need an adult conversation. Let's talk about
Hmm.
something that's real. And it doesn't have to be, the stuff you see on the news. It doesn't have to be politics. It doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be parenting. Those things are
Yeah.
fine and we can talk about those things. But I'm okay with going deep into basketball. I'm going, we
Hmm.
can talk deep about, relationships. We can talk deep about work if that's what it is. But it's something that's beyond the surface level for me is a huge part of uh, my mental happiness, my mental satisfaction,
Yeah.
and being mentally stable. Like I have to have that, and when I don't have it, I'm a little off balanced, and
Hmm.
and it feels that way. I know when I've been talking to my kids too much,
Yeah.
and
You already
and not
know.
not to the adults because I'm talking like a kid and thinking like a kid, and I'm like I don't. That's not who I am. I'm way deeper than that. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's a big deal for me. Um, I've got a few other, but before I go into more, I want to hear one from you. I got some things I do, but
You got a few
I want
more?
to hear
Okay.
I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I have one big one for me
Yeah.
is actually checking on my mental health,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because I am a person that grew up not doing it and it
Hmm.
ended up leading to a lot of issues, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So checking on my mental health is something that I do that helps me with my mental health because I'm more aware. Now that I'm more
Yeah.
aware, I can
Hmm.
say, all right, well, how are we feeling? So honestly, when I wake up every day, I ask myself how I'm feeling. Like,
Yeah.
okay, how are we feeling?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
based on, my internal responses, I go from there. Because if
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm going to determine what's going on. Okay, is it something I'm doing? Is it something that I'm not doing? Or is it something natural, right? Because for me, a lot of things come naturally. Like sometimes
Hmm.
I'll just wake up in a funny mood. Maybe I had a funny dream or something, like, and I'll just
Yeah.
wake up in a weird mood or I thought about something, even, because things don't really trigger me, but maybe they do. So like
Right.
I'm like, all right, well, maybe this is just something natural.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And also to piggyback on what you said, talking about it is just as important to
Yeah.
me as checking on it. And that's something
Hmm.
that I found out, through the likes of you, through the likes of like our group,
Hmm.
is talking about your mental health and being vulnerable when you
Yeah.
talk about your mental health. And you could just say, even if it doesn't matter what it is. And, in my other
Hmm.
podcast, I talked about, finding some people that aren't going to judge you, that are just going to let you be you, that are going to listen to you, whether they agree or not. If you
Hmm.
have a space where you can just say, hey, Chad, I'm struggling. Like,
Hmm.
I got to talk to you. Maybe I did something, because you already know. Like, I might hit you with some, hey, I
Yeah.
did this. And if somebody like even looks funny in that moment,
Hmm.
I can throw you off instead
Yeah.
of just saying, yeah, what you got? Let's talk about it. So
Yeah,
talking
man.
about it and checking on it for me is absolutely paramount. I'm
Yeah,
talking
man.
just at the highest of priorities.
It's not soft, it's not weak, and I
Well,
think
that's the other.
sometimes
So let me
that's the
hold on. Let
that's the
me let me
thing.
cut in for a hot second. When it comes, and I'm gonna pick on men for this one.
Yeah.
When it comes to like mental health, it for some odd reason, a lot of people think of it as being soft, right?
Hmm.
And that's something growing up that I think a lot of men experience, even in anything. Like if you cry, you're soft. If you
Yep.
do this, you're soft. The way you talk is soft. So when it comes to mental health, I've even got it online. Like if
Hmm.
I talk
Hmm.
about mental health, well, you just soft. Like you have to
Yeah.
get over that. And that's kind
Yeah.
of why
You
I
got to.
preach not giving a fuck, right? Because you
Right.
got to have that in your system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to struggle. You got to say, you know what? I'm not doing well. I got to talk to you, whether the people on the outside think it's soft or not. We got to
Yeah.
get this out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we do to each other, right? We and I say we, not necessarily our group, because I think we've got enough maturity in our group to not do this to each other. But I think that's what most folks will do to each other is, man, we're not here to talk about that, or
Hmm.
we can't go there.
Right.
That's
And I'm like, why
soft.
can't we? Hold on,
Yeah.
wait. How
Yeah.
about you answer why we can't?
Right.
Because you got something, you might have some things going on, and people don't
Yeah.
realize once you start
Hmm.
opening up, you might start understanding and realizing some things like, you know what, this was really good for me.
Yeah, and it's not a good practice, and piggybacking off of what you just said regarding men, it's not a good practice to just suppress stuff. And I think that's what we've been trained to do, right? We've
That's how
just
we're
been,
trained.
yeah, we're trained
That's
to, when you're dealing with something, just eat it, right? Eat
yeah,
it, deal with it. Nobody wants
yeah.
to hear it. Nobody cares. You're soft.
Bro, you're
No, you
soft,
can't
man.
cry. You don't tell your wife. Like there's a million things we've been told to do and kind of programmed to do. Maybe if not blatantly told, but just programmed to do because that's what society expects, right? They expect you
Hmm.
to just be a man about it. And
Hmm.
to me, I'm glad that concept is starting to change. Like even the fact that people talk about mental health openly now
Period.
shows me that, okay, at least folks are starting to understand that this is a real thing, and I hope that it gets picked up more in the black male community,
Sure.
because we still really struggle with that. We really struggle with the idea of, you know anything that has to do with emotions is considered soft, right? That's
Yeah.
why we play the pause game,
Yeah. Right.
right? That's
I was
why,
wondering if this was going to come up
you
during this
already know. You
conversation.
already know. You already
Before we
know.
started talking, I was like, is this going to come up? And there it is.
It's the thing, man. And it's because anything that comes close to being considered soft, or,
Yeah.
man, crazy, dare I say gay, or, something
Yeah.
like that, people get funny. And I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah. I don't know
Um,
why either.
it's just programmed to, I got to say pause because I want to make sure people know I'm a man,
Yeah.
and, I'm a man first. And it's like, okay, I get that, man. I understand what you're trying to protect, but we gotta let that go.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
we gotta let
1,000.
that
And we've
go.
talked about that,
Hmm.
before. That is 1,000, right?
Hmm.
We have to somehow come up off of this, like, you're just tough
Hmm. Hmm.
mentality, right?
Hmm.
But I also think that there is a balance there,
Yeah.
right? Because I personally think, like, when shit goes down, who does the fam look to? Like,
Yep.
they look to your ass, right? So
Yep.
I
Yep.
do think that there is an element of,
Yeah.
being a little bit tough in
Hmm.
there. But I think it's a balance. And I think that for me and a lot of other people, it was just be tough. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, hey, be tough, but you can also be soft. Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
something with my sons, right? Like,
Hmm.
hey, be
Hmm.
tough, cry if you have to. But like
Yeah.
you and I played college sports, but if you're hurt, sometimes you got to fight through that, right?
Man, you
Like
do.
sometimes
You
you got to
do.
fight through it
You do
because
got to tough it
you
out
already know when you get
sometimes.
to a certain level, if you come out, you might not go back in.
You ain't going back in.
Like that's just all that there is to it, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But I do believe that there
Yeah.
is a nice balance in
Yeah.
being tough and just being soft. And for a lot of people, we missed out on that soft side. I know
Yes.
I did growing up. Just
We
growing up
do.
on that soft side, I couldn't be soft. I remember one time, just a little backstory, I jumped off like 20 feet and I was in Chicago with my dad. I
Yeah.
feel like I broke my ankle.
Uh-huh.
All I wanted to do was just hug and cry to my dad, and my dad said,
Yeah.
"Tough it out." And
Yeah. Yeah. Deal with it.
I'm sitting in the car. I've never struggled that hard to not cry. And like
Yeah.
that's one thing, and that's why I talk
Hmm.
about trauma. Though that sticks out every time I talk about being soft. Just
Yeah.
that moment.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
things like that to where my dad could have said, "Okay, this man's ankle might be really hurt. Let me embrace
Yeah.
it." It was just, nah, you're good.
Yeah.
Walk it off. I said,
Yeah.
I have never been that hurt.
bro. And that's what we see, right? So we emulate that. We
Mm-hmm.
see,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, personally, I never saw my dad cry until I was 20 something years old,
Bro, but I
and
didn't see my dad cry until my grandpa died, and
yeah,
I was in
yep.
my late 20s at the time. I'm
That's when I
talking.
saw my dad cry.
I
Yep.
said, what?
Yeah.
And for me, my brother was the same way because he experienced
Hmm.
that. I never saw my brother cry. It was
Yeah. Yeah.
unbelievable, and that's kind of where
Hmm.
I started it. I
Yeah.
said, and I'm emotional. You already
Yeah.
know I'm emotional. I'm soft, but I said,
Right.
I don't. Nobody's crying. How are
Yeah.
they doing this? And I just
Yeah.
tried to emulate it, and it just caused a lot of
Mhm.
problems.
It does. If that's not you, I mean, it'd
Because
be
it works for
different.
some.
It
It
works for
does.
some.
It
Yeah.
worked. It worked for
Some
my brother. It
people
didn't work
come
for
from
me.
a hard background. Like I think of my grandpa, and I know for a fact that man did not cry very often because he couldn't, as he grew up in the society he grew up in and what he
Yep.
had to do, he had to be hard. He was a hard ass black man, and
Hmm.
that's just that's just who he was.
Yeah.
That's not to say that he wasn't, maybe he didn't have high mental health,
Hmm.
but that was just what worked for him. That's what he had to be to survive. I don't think that's the case all the
I
time
don't
in
either. Yeah.
today's society. Like I
Hmm.
know for me, there's times, when you raise boys, like you said, when you raise boys, you don't want them to be soft because the world isn't soft. The world
That's
is
the other
tough.
part. The
You
world
know,
is
you don't want to
tough.
be soft, but
Right.
you also have to let them know that there's a time and a space for you to let those emotions out. There's time
Yep.
and space for you to be in touch with those things that you don't want to show everybody else all the time, and
Yep.
that's
And
okay.
utilize it. And
Yeah,
utilize your
utilize it,
space.
and
Utilize your
don't
space.
hold it. Don't hang on to it to the point where you don't know what to do with those emotions anymore. If you've been suppressing them for years and something happens where it triggers that emotion again and you're trying to hold it back, man,
Bro,
that's
you're in
just
trouble.
you're in
You're in
trouble.
trouble.
You're
That
you're
was
gonna you
me.
got to have an outlet.
That was me for almost half my life was when
Yeah,
something happened, it was just an outburst. It
right.
was just okay because I and the problem is one of the problems is when you suppress your feelings, you actually think you're doing the right thing. All right. You
Yeah.
you get in this mode like, well, I'm doing the right thing. Like life is tough, but I'm handling it
Right.
until it comes out.
Yeah. Right.
And then you're like,
Exactly.
I haven't handled
I
shit.
can't. Yeah. Yeah. That was horrible. The way I just handled that was horrible.
That was just horrible. And
Now
it
I got to
wasn't even that big
backtrack.
of a deal. It was
Yep.
just somebody said something and I went absolutely bananas,
Went dummy for
you
no
know?
reason, and that's what we do. And heaven forbid if that outburst comes in like a work setting or with your spouse. Now you've done damage that you might not be able to fix.
And
You
I did
know,
that at the last job. And
man,
luckily my boss was a good friend because
right?
I would have been canned.
It would have been a wrap.
That was a
That's it.
classic D Brown turn up.
Right.
And that anywhere else, okay, goodbye.
Yeah.
Like
Everywhere else.
don't even finish. Just get your stuff
Yeah.
and go. But you're
Get
right.
out of here,
You're right. Those things can spring up at some
man.
bad times. So you have to have a
Hmm.
space for that.
You
And I
do.
think that that's really good. That
Hmm.
those are the good things.
Yeah.
What are some the bad things? Or do you still have some what's good for your
Yeah.
mental health? Go ahead.
Well, I think for me, yeah, I'll throw out one other one that I think is a good practice and something that I've done forever, but I think it's more important as I've gotten older is reading good material
Hmm.
and writing. One, reading good material to me kind of exercises that you know what I aspire to be, what I aspire to do. I always read from people who write better than me because
Hmm.
I'm a writer, but not everybody knows I'm a writer.
Right.
So I
Right.
like to read material from people that just have a really good grasp of language and expressing themselves and being deliberate with words. Like I love that type of stuff. So I always read material that stretches me. I don't like to
Hmm.
read basic stuff that anybody can read unless I'm reading
Hmm.
it to my kids or something. So that has been a huge thing, reading good material. And then for me, as you know, I love to write and I've always loved to write. My major is English writing, so
Yeah.
I've always felt like that is a great outlet, especially for boys, and especially because what we just talked about, people suppress those emotions. So that's a great way for you to just, even if you don't talk to someone, which I would recommend that more than
Very
writing,
recommended.
but
Very, yeah,
if you want to
talking. Yeah.
write, that's one way of just letting that emotion out, whatever it is, put it on that pen, and you may be able to come back to it later, but at least you got it out. Like, hey,
Yeah,
this
and
is how
that's
I was
kind of
feeling at that
yeah.
time.
And to piggyback on that, because I'm in the social world, what
Hmm.
you look at socially can affect you in a
Yeah,
way too, right? If you're
yeah,
not watching things that are positive to you
yeah,
and you're watching things that are negative, hey, you're going to be in trouble, right?
yeah.
And you might not even realize what you're watching is negative or
Hmm.
positive. I mean, you would know if it's positive,
Right.
but sometimes you're watching things that are negative and you don't even realize it, and that's just affecting you
Yeah,
on a level as well. Same thing. Like your outlets have, I recommend, having your outlets be positive, right? So
yeah.
if you, and social media can be positive, right?
It can be.
But you
Yeah.
got to use it correctly,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Can
to
be
even,
reckless.
right? And even so to jump in the negative aspects of mental
Hmm.
health, speaking on negativity, I think one of the hugest things that goes against your mental health is being around negative people or negative
Yes.
energy.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and I didn't realize this until I was way older,
Hmm.
until I actually dug into mental health and who and me and just bettering myself. And I
Hmm.
looked at the people, I was not good, not
Hmm.
good.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then once it's gone,
Yeah.
now you're like, what?
Yeah. It's like everything is opened up now.
I've
Yeah.
missed out on all this. So I
Yeah.
think that that's huge.
Man.
Determining these things in your life that's negative, and if you can, it's got to go, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes you got to make that tough decision, and
Man.
you just have to. It's got to go, or it's got
It's
to be
got
like
to.
placed somewhere else. It
Yeah.
can't be right here in the forefront. You
It can't
got to
be.
throw it somewhere else.
Exactly. And the thing about it is people really get nervous about cutting things or people out of their life.
Hmm.
And I understand why, but at the same time, I don't even like to say but. And at the same time,
I
what
know,
I'll
right?
say, I don't want to say but because that negates everything. And at the same time, I think it doesn't always have to come to cutting it out. Maybe there's a way for you to change it
Right.
or make it different. Case in point, you have a friendship or you have someone that you interact with regularly that is negative, or maybe you just realize that their energy has been bringing you down. That doesn't mean that you have to immediately stop talking to that person or cut that person out of your life. Maybe there's a conversation that has to happen. Say, hey, man, I just want to be honest with you. I feel like when we interact, my spirit is low. And I feel like it's just kind of been negatively impacting how I view things. And I feel like we
Hmm.
need we need to change how what we talk about, or we need to change, where we're going in our conversations, because I feel like it'll be beneficial for both of us. I think
Yep.
that's okay to have that conversation too. Now, if that person responds and says, "Man, forget you," like, all right, cool, hey, I made my effort. But
Yeah.
sometimes people just start cutting people out and they don't even know that they were doing something to bother you. So it's like you got to give folks a chance.
That would be moi.
Right,
I have a
right,
tendency to just let
right.
things go.
Yeah,
And for
yeah.
me, but you're absolutely right. I
Hmm.
think it's, preferential, not preferential, but I think it's on that person, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I typically try to determine beforehand if that's just the best cause. Because some
Yeah.
people don't want to hear it.
Some people don't want to hear
Some
it,
people just
and
don't want
that's
to hear
that's
it. So if
fair
I
too.
determine that you don't want to hear it based on our conversations, I'm not gonna lie, you're out of here
Yeah.
nowadays, right?
Hmm.
But you're
Hmm.
absolutely right. The recommended route would probably be to maybe have that conversation.
Yeah.
Like, hey, let me just talk to you for a second and
Hmm.
just see. But then, so I deal with, or a lot of my followers are people pleasers, empaths, and things like that. You can get caught up in that conversation.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
another reason why I do what I do, because you can be like, oh, and if somebody's already manipulating you, now you've
Yes.
just opened yourself up again for more manipulation. They're going to
Very
make you
true.
think that there's nothing wrong, right? When you
Yes.
clearly know that there's something wrong.
Something's wrong, and I think that's the part where you have to determine if it's going to be better for you to just rip the band-aid
Correct.
off, or if that person, and I think that's probably what it boils down to. Now that we're talking about this out loud, it probably boils down to the level of importance that person has in your life.
Yep.
Right? You can't cut out family, right? Maybe some family, but for
Some,
the most
yeah,
part,
some, but I
you
mean,
can't.
some.
If you have a toxic relationship with a sibling, like, that's really hard to just cut that
It's
person
got to
out.
be
It's,
tough. I never
or
had that or experienced that, but
yeah,
that has to be tough.
that's rough. Or with even with your own children, or with
Hmm.
your parents, that's really hard to just say, you know what, I'm done with you. I think those are the folks you have to determine, is this someone worth keeping in my life? I think it's easier to do that with friendships than family,
Sure.
but because family is going to be family. And I think it's easier to chalk up that's just how they are when it's family.
Hmm.
But when it's friends, you have to determine the importance of that relationship in your life. Is this relationship important enough for me to have this conversation, or is this
Hmm.
somebody that if I don't talk to them again, they're gonna be all right and I'm gonna be all right?
Right.
And that's kind of how I determine it. Like if
Hmm.
we're gonna be good after this, I'm okay with cutting you loose.
That's fair.
We'll be cool. You'll be cool. I'll be cool, and that's just how it's gonna be.
Yeah. No,
I
that's
can live
really
with
fair.
that.
I see nothing wrong with that. But you got
Hmm.
to determine it, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
just go from there. But then also, you just got to make that decision too,
Yeah.
right? You have to just say, hey, this is going to be, and I promote kind of being selfish with your mental health at times. If
Yeah.
it's going to be better for you, you might as well go ahead and do it,
Yeah.
right? Because then it ends up being, made, it might end up being better for the other person. I just don't
Yeah.
think that that's the route to go.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't
Exactly.
think that's the route to go. Like
It's
you're
not.
responsible for your mental health. Like
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it's you. They're
Yep.
not responsible for you.
Nope.
You are. So I make that switch. And that's
I
just how
agree.
I operate. Like,
No,
hey,
that's how you should.
if it's not good for me, it's got to go, or it's got to be, managed, or it's got to
Hmm.
be, placed somewhere else on the ladder.
Hmm.
But,
Hmm. No
I'm
question.
always just like, it's you. This is
Yeah.
your mental health.
No question. And you
You
have
got
to
to be happy.
determine what you can and can deal with. What are the things that I can tolerate? What are the things that I can't tolerate? What level do I want this person to sit at in my life? Right?
Yeah.
Is this a level 5 person, or is this like a level 2 or 3
Yep. And that's
person?
boundaries right there,
And
right?
that's okay.
That's
Yeah.
boundaries for me.
Hmm.
Boundaries is about placing people in their proper place.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
have access to what they only need to have access to. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And that's why I've gotten better as I've gotten older at reacting to people, because I start to realize where they're at in my life. And I'm like,
mm-hmm.
wait a minute, this person is someone I interact with once every couple weeks,
Right.
right? So why would I have an emotional reaction to what they have to say?
Yeah.
Um, it's the same as trying to decide if you're going to fight people on Facebook and social media. Like, that person doesn't care about you. They're sitting at a keyboard writing stuff just so you can get pissed off. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't respond to that. It's the same with some people you interact with, in person. Every now and then they're going to say something that pisses you off. Are
Yep.
you going to respond to that? Give them a piece of your mind every time? Because I feel like that's going to be more draining for you. Right?
Absolutely.
That's
No,
going to
that's
be more
100.
draining for you.
That's
So
100.
yeah, you got to know where people are at. I piggyback that same thought as far as what negatively impacts mental health.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people. It's the
Mm-hmm.
people that are a part of your life, and what you allow them to have access to. And like you've said in many videos before, you can't let people have access to your peace, right? You can't let people disturb that.
Mm-mm. No,
So
you just can't. And for me, I think my last negative
mhm.
impact on your mental health is piggybacking on what I said earlier, is not checking on it,
Yeah.
right? Not checking on your mental health, right?
Mhm.
Or just being oblivious to your mental health, just saying, I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Like, hey, no, I'm okay. You like, or even suppressing, like, even if you're holding things in, like, all
Yep.
those things to me are just negative, and that's just from personal experience.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got stuff you got to get off your chest,
Mhm.
it's got to be said to somebody. And for a lot
Yeah.
of people, and some people don't have, that person to talk to.
Right.
I would say you can even find communities online. Like if you
Yeah.
don't have somebody to talk to, you can find
Man.
places to go. And
Yep.
it's encouraged. It might not be the best, but
Yeah.
it helps.
Anything is better than nothing.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Anything's better
and
than nothing.
that's why I like my social media space.
Yeah.
Like it's a place where if you need to come say something, even if it's a comment, come
Yep.
comment, and there's a whole bunch of people that, understand you.
They get it. They get it. And it's better than being in that place where you don't know if anybody can relate to you. You don't know if anybody shares your same thoughts. Like, that's a
Right.
that's a lonely place to be. You don't
And a
want to
lot of
be
people
that
feel
person.
alone. That's part of
Yeah.
why I do what I do too. It's part of this
Hmm.
podcast. I don't want people to feel alone because I know that feeling.
Yes. Yes. It's a sick feeling. It's sinking. You feel like you're on an island. And
Hmm.
that's the last place you want to be if you're talking about mental health, is somewhere by yourself. all the time.
Yeah,
I'm an introvert, and I know I don't need to be by myself all the time,
sure,
right? I get
sure.
my energy from not being around people, but
Hmm.
it has to for me, when it comes to mental health, it has to be a balance. It
Yep.
has to be, you got to know when it's time to have those conversations and when it's time to pull back. And like you said, you got to have an outlet. You got to have a friend, a group of friends, a group
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
that can hear you and not judge and not condemn. And that is something, it sounds cliche, but it's so impactful.
I know
Now
that's the
that
other
we've
part. It's
lived
things
some
sound
life,
cliche. Yeah. Now that
now that we've lived some
we've
life,
lived and we're
oh
not getting
man,
any younger. There's so many,
nah,
like one day you just wake up
uh,
like, damn, I'm older
I'm
now.
old now. I'm a old ass dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like, and I would have probably, before we have kids, before we live the life that we've lived, our testimony and our feelings about this would be a lot different.
100%.
It would be different. 19-year-old, SeaWorld is going to say something like, yeah, I can do it on my own. I'm an only child. I don't need nobody. I'm
Hmm.
good. And now I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know if
Bruh.
I feel the same way. It's a little
That's
different.
100. Yeah,
It's a little
that's
different.
100%, man. That's
Yeah, man.
100%. For
For
sure.
sure.
Man, this was a great conversation.
Yes, sir.
This was
Yes,
good,
sir.
man. Like we got to do
Appreciate it.
this. I know I say this every season, every
Yeah.
month, but we got to do this more often, man. This is good. I
Yeah.
think this is helpful. It's
Yeah.
going to be helpful for a lot of people.
We're gonna be on it. We're gonna be on it. This is
Bet.
the
All
year,
right. And we're going to
2025.
look forward to one of your episodes here in the
Absolutely.
next 12 months. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for joining the show. And if anybody
Appreciate it.
out there like this, go ahead and like, share, subscribe. Stay tuned. We're going to be back with more mental health, more petty, more shenanigans,
Yes,
the whole
sir.
nine.
Yes, sir.
Petty
Yes, sir.
Luya. You already know.
Bet. Appreciate it, brother.
Yes,
Appreciate it. Keep
sir.
doing your
Yes,
thing.
sir. Absolutely. You too.
Yes, sir.